Okay, well, I think we can get going somehow. So again, hello everyone. My name is Sebastian. We will have this session on AI for business, and we'll be speaking about running AI projects in the enterprise. On this presentation slide here, I've put down, well, the schedule of talks that PySchool and PyCampus are giving in this edition of Maker Faire 2020. So today, actually, we've already had 3 sessions. This one is the AI for Business at 4 p.m. session. Tomorrow we have another 2, and on Sunday we have another 2. So you're welcome to join there again. The link here, the bit.ly link, you can open already. It's a survey that I'd like you guys to fill in the first few minutes of the talk. I'll be speaking about some of the questions before you send them out, and I'll tell you when I'm done and when you can send them out. So we'll take a couple of minutes to fill it in and send it out properly so that I can read everyone's answer at the same time. Okay. So let me introduce things a little bit. So we are part of PyCampus, seed stage, I was saying, and so we've done these 14 investments. Here are the 44 first investments. I haven't updated my slide in the last few weeks, and that's when the last 5 investments have happened. A number of these, well, 2 actually, 2 of these, namely Boom and Grin. These are 2 unicorns, as they're called, which means that they are startups with a market valuation of over 1 billion euro each. So they're kind of very fast growing startups in which PyCampus has invested very early on. And we own a very tiny share of the companies every time, of course, but still, it tells us that the investment strategy that we have is a good one. We're located physically, the companies, those are the startups that are with us physically, which is about half of them. We're in the Eur district in Rome, in the south of Rome, and we've turned villas into our offices, and we've called them Pi 1 through 6, and then with this Pi 7, which is up in Toscana, which we use for seminars. LevelFive is one of the startups in our portfolio. LevelFive was founded by people who used to work with Elon Musk at Tesla. We're working on the autopilot, and they realized that the autopilot currently still many of the self-driving car makers need LiDARs on the roof of their self-driving cars, and it's probably going to stay like this for a number of years. The only way to get rid of the LiDAR is to have very high precision maps and have very high precision computer vision. And so LevelFive attacked the first problem and created high precision maps by paying people, essentially created an app, paid people a few cents per recorded kilometer of road, that is, and did triangulation of all the videos. They did 3D registration, as it's called. So it means identifying the objects on the videos, and based on the GPS and the imprecise GPS signal by triangulation, they were able to pinpoint all of the objects on their videos, so typically traffic lights, the pavement, and so forth, with centimetric precision. So that crowdsourcing plus AI strategy enabled them to produce these high precision maps that they wanted to make. Kiwi is a self-driving robot that performs food delivery. Currently, we deliver, I think, something like 5,000 meals every week with these little robots. The idea is that you can pack them all into a van, load them with food, pack them into the van drives into town, releases the robots drive to the doors, to the customers, deliver the food with a, a code that you receive on your mobile phone. You can open the lid of the robot and then retrieve your food. Robot drives back to the van, get loaded into the van, and off we go for a new cycle. And the idea here is that this solves the problem of the last mile in food delivery, which is the most expensive part of the delivery you can imagine. And AI here is built into the self-driving part. They started off having people with joysticks actually driving, viewing the streets and driving the little robots remotely, but then they, having recorded that many hours of video, they managed to build self-driving software for these little robots. So these are just examples of startups that we have inside PyCampus in our portfolio. And I wanted to quickly tell you a bit about PySchool. So I'm the managing director of PySchool. At PySchool, we do rapid prototyping in AI. I'm going to tell you quickly about this because that's where I'll be picking my examples from. And at the end, I'll send out another survey for you to contact form essentially. So if you want to get in touch and learn more about PySchool or see if we should have a chat, then you can leave me your details there. So essentially, PySchool is both a rapid prototyping center and a learning environment. So what we do is several times a year, we invite engineers, AI engineers from all over the world. We turn them into AI specialists. So we upskill them. How do we do that? We give them an industry project, which is sponsored by a company or by their own employer sometimes. And we help them solve the challenge that the company is giving us. Solve the challenge means we take the company's data usually, and we try and carry out the tasks that they're asking us for. We do this in a very specific format, namely 8 weeks, a team of 2 people, and a ton of mentoring, very high quality mentoring. I'll tell you more about the mentoring in a second. How does it work? It's merit first because people don't pay, so participants don't pay to get in. It's all sponsored by the companies. It's learning by doing, so there's no teaching, nothing like lectures, or it's very unlike a boot camp. And it's real world projects. So we work on real challenges, which are usually hairy, thorny, difficult, just like the real world challenges are. And we go and solve those. We don't play with toy problems. Who is on board here? So you can see a couple of faces here. So I'm the managing director of PySchool, and I'm also director of AI at Translated. I did my PhD in statistical machine learning at the University of Cambridge, and I've been doing AI ever since, I guess, 2000. First, I worked in speech recognition and natural language processing, so that's language understanding. And then I did my PhD in statistical machine learning, which covers essentially all of what people call AI nowadays. Marco Trombetti and Isabel are the co-founders of PyCampus, also Translated, and of PySchool. The current CEO of PySchool is Isabel. We have a faculty advisory board composed of veterans of the AI industry. So that's Alex, who's a prof of computer science at Carnegie Mellon, serial entrepreneur, created several spin-offs, all in the field of AI, language, and so forth. And he actually became the first head of AI at Facebook when he sold his first, when he sold one of his companies, namely that was Jibigo a couple of years ago, to Facebook. In Facebook, lately, not yet, I should update my slide, Hassan is no longer with Facebook. He's left a couple of weeks ago, creating his own startup. He used to be the director of AI at Facebook. Before that, he was director of AI at Amazon, and before that at eBay. Marcello Federico is a world expert on language technology, and he's currently at Amazon. Used to be at Fondazione Bruno Kessler, a private research foundation here in Italy. And here are some mentors, so people who help us carry out, implement these challenges, solve these challenges that some of which I'm going to give examples of today. So one is Łukasz. Łukasz is a researcher at Google Brain. There's Ricardo, who's the chief data scientist at Orionis Biosciences, which is a genomics plus AI company, Max, who's a deep learning engineer at SkyMine. SkyMine is an investment of PyCampus in the domain of AI platforms. I think it's the only investment that we have which is actually an AI platform. It's called Deep Learning for J. It's an open source framework for deep learning on the Java virtual machine, so for the enterprise. And we have got 4 mentors here. Novi is the fourth one. Got 4 mentors here, but we've actually got many more, just that I didn't have enough space to put them all on the slide. That's the people who help us solve these challenges. We do different things. The program that I told you about, 8 weeks, rapid prototyping, is the one we call School of AI. It's our flagship program. We've done 66 projects so far. We've trained 129 alumni, and we are finishing our 7th session as we speak. It's going to finish next week on Friday. And other programs that we have, other services that we offer are AI team support, where we offer coaching, essentially for a target market, I would say probably of SMEs, so people who want to set up their own AI team, data science team, and need help with coaching the team, recruiting the team, and if you're down that line, you'll know what I'm speaking about, retention as well. So keeping all these AI talents in-house instead of having them leave. PyData Academy is a kind of master's program in which we upskill existing teams of data scientists in specific areas of AI to bring them to the state of the art. PyResearch teams is another of our offerings where we create research teams in-house at PyCampus to be able to attract, culturally, essentially attract the best talent in AI, but work for your company. We've got, I said 66 projects in our portfolio currently. That's quite a few. You'll see big names on our list here, small names. Cisco, we did 6 projects with Cisco. We did 6 with Enel as well, Banca Nazionale del Lavoro, Poste Italiane, and quite a few startups and smaller companies. So we've gathered quite a bit of experience on these. And now I'd like to actually enter the actual topic of my talk here, which is AI in the enterprise. And the first thing that I'd like to address is AI and data science maturity. So, and this relates to one of the questions that I have in the survey. It's kind of like a self-assessment of the position of your organization in this maturity model. So I've called the boxes here, if you will, AI novice, AI ready, advanced, and proficient. So one way of modeling what goes on, and hopefully you can map your own situation on that kind of grid, is to look at things this way. You have analytical complexity on the one axis and the operational implementation. So that is, how are you able to think about problems and how are you able to implement the solutions on the other hand. So, if it was a game, if it was a board game, then you would get started in this box here and you would presumably, move here, and then the next step is here. And then when you're at your best, when you're a fully AI driven company, then you're in this square here. Getting started, essentially the idea is you're evaluating things. You're looking at potentiality, at potentials, doing a bit of modeling. Maybe you've got dashboards. You're starting to be metric driven as opposed to gut driven. And you're kind of moving there with the first few steps. In the next step that I call AI ready, you've already done a few pilot projects. You have got a few people who kind of have done it before maybe, or who have taken a couple of courses, they got a bit of education under their belt, and they're able to move things when given enough resources, enough trust, and enough data. The next step is when you're past the pilot stage and when you're moving from the pilot stage to, crucially, moving across the operational axis here, you're moving to deployed systems. So you've got, in this square here, you've got your first deployed systems in operation, and you no longer work on, say, notebooks. Those of you who worked with Jupyter notebooks are an example of that. But instead, you know, it's maybe Python code. It runs in production. It consumes some live data. It produces live predictions and so forth. It's used in operations. And then obviously the next step is when you have moved up this ladder and when the models you have in production are now core to your, well, to your added value, to the product or service that you're working on. Okay, so I'd like to take give you a moment now, take a moment now to fill in the form that I put together for you. This kind of survey, this is the one I'm speaking about. So on your end, it looks a bit different, looks like this. I'd like to ask you how long you've worked with AI before in order to know who I'm speaking to. Know maybe what you're most interested in AI. Category of business applications, that's quite different. So what area of AI, I mean, are you more interested in, I don't know, predictive algorithms, generative algorithms? Are you interested in natural language processing, in vision? Business applications, it could be things like predictive maintenance or anomaly detection or marketing applications, what have you. I'm interested in your organization, if you can let me into those elements as well. And I'm asking you for a kind of first classification of your AI maturity, and then maybe we can discuss a few cases if you want. How much have your organization spent on AI? That's also in order to gauge where you sit on this ladder. And same here. So this is the kind of question, you know, I'm asking them in survey form here, just to see what you're doing. But there are also the questions that you can, if you like, the answers to which help define where on that AI maturity scale you find yourself. The kind of tools, certainly to an expert, are very revealing as to the type of work that you're doing. Okay, random day of the year is because then this is in an anonymous form, a way to identify, very simply identify your answer. And then I can connect it back to the answer you will give me to the second survey at the end of my talk. So you can pick a random day, use the same random day when I ask you next in the next survey, and then I can connect both, but you don't have to reveal anything. Okay, so why don't you take a moment to send in the answer for that? And I'll be monitoring the answers as they trickle in. So we've got 2 responses so far. The following to speak about ideation. And I'm speaking of AI products, AI projects. Ideation, selection of ideas, and I'll give you a couple of criteria here for how to do the selection of the right pilot projects for the organization. So selection obviously entails assessment. Selection and specification, and eventually execution. So these will be a couple of pieces of advice and examples from our project portfolio at PySchool for all these topics. Okay, so here are ideas for how to reason, how to generate ideas. So I've observed in speaking with our customers at PySchool, the challenge sponsors, I've observed that good ideas are generated from 3 starting points. An important one is business needs, very importantly. So this is the main source, I would say, of good ideas for AI pilot projects. Business needs really mean those things in your business that have have a pain attached. Those things that are an issue and that need a solution. Obviously, the next thing that we need to bring together with realizing that there's a business pain is obviously, is there an AI solution to that? And so that's part of the assessment from an AI point of view. So it's the kind of next section of my talk. So business means business starting point for AI pilot project means you're reviewing those known business pain points, and you're trying to work out if they are AI relevant in a way. Tech, the idea here is you start from existing technology or technical solutions, maybe that you've seen around, that you know the existence of, and you're trying to see if those things that you see out there, if they make sense for your business. You're trying to match them to your business pains. It could be technology like, you've seen say a platform or a piece of software that does email clustering, and you'd like to see if you can do anything with that in your business. So here the path is from the technology to the business pain. In my first path was from the business pain to the AI solution. So it's quite a different path, if you will. And the third one is starting from the data. Starting from the data means you reason about what data you have in machine readable format, obviously that is, in the organization, and you try and work from there to figure out what you can do with this data, and especially if there's some untapped value in that data and what machine learning or data science technology can help extract the value from that data. So these are the three ideas that when we do workshops, typically with clients, these are the three axes that we tend to alternate between when we do ideation. And we can classify or generate ideas along the money axis as well. So three ways in which AI can have impact, just like any automation technique, really. Reducing costs, so it's an ROI discussion, return on investment. It might be an increase in income, which means maybe there's a thing that you can sell better if you sell it to the right person. So for instance, a while ago, we did a project with the American Express Group with their loyalty card business Payback. And what we tried to do there is we tried to target emails to their right customers to increase the opening rate, which means lower the number of emails we send out and increase the opening rate. The pain that it solves is it reduces the spam effect. It means sending content to people that they will be interested in and reduce the number of things that they receive, which is spam. And this increases income because with the kind of same expense, you're creating more income. Opening new markets is another actually pretty frequent way in which AI brings value. And what that means is that AI makes possible some new product or service that without would not be possible. Think of the Kiwi robots example that I gave earlier. Without machine learning, without self-driving algorithms inside, this would not be a viable business because you'd need to have people drive the little cars through the streets, and this would not be cost effective. Instead, if say human operators only need to take over when a little robot needs to cross the street maybe, or it's been tipped over and it needs to be put back on or something. So they can intervene only when like in exceptional circumstances, but the bulk of the operation is run automatically. So this is a case where AI makes things possible which would otherwise not be possible. And then here's a number of ideas of features, if you will, that are made possible by AI, and that should give you ideas for where to find well, good ideas. That's what I'm after here. Radical personalization means we're making typically a recommendation completely personalized. So I have two examples to give you here. One is another PyCampus portfolio company, which is Cambridge Cancer Genomics. Cambridge Cancer Genomics is in the business of producing suggestions for human cancer physicians to help them produce the exact right therapy for a given cancer patient. And this is in the field of personalized medicine, AI-supported personalized medicine. So this is exactly what I'm speaking of. Another example from our portfolio of projects at PySchool. So we did this project for Fazi, which is an Italian company that gives you alerts. They alerts for calls for tender, calls for project. They monitor all the sources, the ministries, the regions, the big institutions, the big companies in Italy, and they will give you an alert when there's a call for tender that falls in your specific industry sector. Now, humans, they have editors, humans are only capable of classifying a certain number of calls into a certain number of categories. So they do this at the rate that they can, but what they can't do is they can't personalize the suggestion to every one of their thousands of subscribers. This is only possible if there's AI to do the personalization. So that's what it's all about, okay? Orthogonal data here, the idea is you can bring in some data to illuminate a decision-making process that would otherwise be left untapped. For instance, credit scoring is a very old, I would say, pain point in the banking sector and in the loan sector generally. The idea of credit scoring is you need to assign a score to people who take on loans or that you lend money to in order to make sure that they will repay you, that they will not default. Credit scoring has historically been done only based on indicators from past behavior, revenue, and financial indicators. What is possible now, and that's orthogonal data, is to include completely different data for instance, a bank who needs to decide to make they need to decide whether to give this person 5,000 euros as a loan. They can now use obviously with the consent of the individuals, they can use other data like their spending pattern. So they can maybe it's a customer at the bank already, and so they let the bank take a decision based on how regular they are at their spending, whether they go into overdraft very often or not, and so forth. So these are spending patterns. More interestingly, they can look at their utilities bills to see how these are dealt with. They can also look at, and that's what some banks have started doing, and some people, some clients, some customers are supporting because they think this is a good way for banks to make informed decisions. Well, they just simply look at their social profile. In China, you have credit worthiness scores, which are implemented at an increasing number of municipalities throughout the country in order to essentially allow people to sort of be rewarded for socially useful behavior. Socially useful as opposed to socially damaging. So the idea here is that, and that's the thinking in the Chinese market. Let's be clear, it wouldn't work like this in a European market, but the range of signals that we're taking into account is similar to the idea here that I'm describing. Okay, through the last three bullet points should be clear from the titles, I guess. And we've got quite a couple of ideas to generate projects. This is an example here. It's a flashcard for an example we did at PySchool, where we did the project for NL. And the reason that I'm bringing it up here is because it's a typical example of ideation that works through cost reduction. It works from data that's already present but not utilized. And it's what we call enhanced decision making. So the idea here is, well, NL manages the medium voltage distribution network in very many parts of Italy. And they need to deal with outages. Many of the outages are due to weather issues. And so what they asked us to do is to work on weather forecast models, historical, so that's two different things. They asked us to take into account data that they had of historical weather forecasts. So that would mean on 1st of January 2020, what was the forecast for the week after 1st of January? So they recorded this. And then, because we are past that date already, past that week, we know what the weather actually was on those dates, and we know what the outages due to rain, snow, ice, thunderstorms, and so forth, the incidents actually were, and we recorded all of this. And now what we're trying to do, the task that we're after, is we ingest weather forecasts and we predict probable impact of bad weather on the distribution line. And this is something that didn't used to be possible previously at a fine-grained scale like what is necessary for NL. And so this is only possible because we can do that, over the entire, if you will, grid subdivision of Italy into grids. I think in this project here, we subdivided this into grids of 5 kilometers, maybe even less. And we processed all the forecasts, the historical outage recordings in order to produce these predictive maintenance information. Here's a completely different type of idea of AI pilot project. It's a jobs recommendation engine. So Employerland essentially works on the gamification interface for people who want to apply to jobs, so job seekers, and companies who want to recruit for jobs. So what Employerland asks us to produce is a matching service, jobs to candidates. Okay, and so the difference between the two here, you can probably spot already. They're very different in the sense that this task here is very easy to describe in terms of a machine learning task. You have inputs, you have outputs. In the jobs recommendation engine case, you can also describe what you would like to do. So you know that you have, well, job descriptions, and then you know that you somehow have candidate profiles. You'd like to do a good match. However, a crucial difference here is that the match, the quality of a given match, is not something that is easy to make objective, to quantify. So how do you say what is a good match? You probably need to have a human give an assessment of that. And it's very costly to ask a human about, scoring one candidate's match, one profile's match with, say, 100 jobs. But it's even more expensive, obviously, and this is what you'd need, however, to match 1,000 jobs against 1,000 candidates. Because you'd need, essentially, if you wanted to do a full job, you would need to score all the combinations. So that would be 100 times 100 combinations, score all of them, and assign a sort of goodness score. And that's 10,000 assessments. And this is obviously very, very expensive to produce. So we need ways around that. And so in that sense, the the project that we did here was very different from the project that we did here, where, well, this is a kind of straightforward application of a predictive algorithm, while this is an entire system. There's a system that, you know, leaving aside the chatbot part, which we added on top to kind of like wrap up the matching part. We worked on a system to extract information from a profile, extract information from a job description, and we took expert knowledge from employer lands, HR specialists to devise initially rules and then later automatically train on generated data for how to do the match. So I'm just having a glass of water to refresh my voice here. And then we can move on. Okay, past ideation. Now I want to speak about selection. So what are good pilot projects for your organization? There are the projects with business impact. You want to make sure that you're not picking tourist projects, because that's an easy way to have all of your efforts dismissed. Instead, you want to pick those where you will generate some value for an organization. Some value could be money for companies, but value comes in very different shapes and forms. If you're in an NGO, for instance, value could mean outreach. If you're in an institution, it could mean reliability, it could mean quality. So that different things that value could mean here. What I'm saying is, pick those with business impact, but maybe not a project that is sort of core to your business, because deploying it is extremely difficult if much of the business relies on that operation. From experience, out of these 66 projects, we've seen that those which are slowest to deploy, and that's not good for a pilot project. It might be good for a project further down the maturity scale, but it's not good for a pilot project. Those projects which are slow to deploy are the ones which are close to the business core. Okay, and so you want to avoid picking up a project that is potentially with high risk. My advice is you pick projects with few stakeholders. That's better, because then running the pilot is a faster affair. Familiarity is important in the sense that it's good if it's a task that is known to the organization already, in the sense that they do it already. And it's easier to pick a single task than a complete process. You know, so attack a simple thing rather than a complex thing. And here are indicators, checks for your projects, kind of mini checklist. Does it or does it not have good business impact? So you can build a score. I mean, you can build a scoring matrix here. We do that when we do workshops on assessing business ideas. Well, business value of AI ideas. We use exactly this scoring matrix. Does it have business impact? Do you own, and every word is important here, do you own, so do you have inside the organization, or can you acquire input, output data? And by that, usually people say, you know, we've got data, okay, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is, do you have examples, hundreds, thousands of examples of input, the output data? That is what matters. And on top of that, it needs to be in machine readable form. Many people come to me and say, oh, my company is full of data, no problem about that. And then we look at the task that they propose, and yes, we've got plenty of data about that task, they say. And then I ask them, okay, do you have examples of like for a given input, the desirable output? And they say, no, we don't have that, because that's what humans do. And you don't collect that, do you? No, we don't collect that. So we don't have the link between the input and the output. And that's what is missing. Third point, can we quantify the performance of our system? So that's the metric aspect. Fourth aspect, is it AI relevant? There's plenty of automation projects which are the success of which is due to good automation, is due to IT, is due to faster databases, bigger databases, is due to some sort of advanced algorithms, but is not due to AI. So if we want to go for something where AI is relevant, then we need to find a project that can be solved by AI. I think I'm going to show you, or we're going to see if we have time for these extra examples later. Specification of an AI project. So that's the advice that stems from our experience on these 66 projects that we have run in the course of the last 3 years at PySchool. So important bits to specify your projects. You specify where your data comes from and what it looks like. You specify what a machine learning task would sound like or could be formulated as. And this is usually a piece where you need someone with knowledge of machine learning or AI. You need to specify how it can be inserted into a workflow. That usually means what is going to be the user interface to that thing. How are humans going to interact with this system? And this is usually the case because most, certainly pilot projects, they are not part of a bigger automation, but instead they're usually exposed to users. And so it's very important to measure the performance of a system to understand how it interacts with users or vice versa, or users interact with it. And obviously, like in any well-specified project, you need to identify stakeholders. And then the next step is you move on to execution. So here you have, I would say, usual, pieces of advice for project execution that can help you on the way. Okay. Do you have any questions? I'm monitoring the Q&A window, and I'd welcome any questions that you might have on the way before I move on. Also going to do the following thing. I'm going to send you already my outro survey when I'm at it. Okay. Contact form. Here you go. Sent you my other survey. So if you're interested in getting in touch and speaking out, maybe something that is specific to you, then that's the way to go here. Still waiting if you have any questions or any input. Either you're not listening or you're pretty timid. I'm sure you should have questions, even if you're not connected to anything that you're doing concretely, but you're thinking of doing. Questions are welcome. Okay. So, okay. If nothing, I'm just going to pursue. We've got an extra, I think, yes, 7 minutes before we need to stop. So give you the form so that since the Zoom room is going to terminate at the turn of the hour, you need the form before we walk out of this room, which is why I sent it to you now. Okay, so okay, so I wanted to speak about, now that I've spoken about these elements here, ideation, so how to generate ideas, good ideas for AI pilot projects, how to do selection, how to specify your pilot project, and then, advice for how to execute. I want to speak about maybe a few sort of less intuitive things about AI projects in the enterprise. So these are from experience, from what we see at PySchool, and well, everything doesn't always work as expected. And here are 4 ways that you can actually watch out for ways in which things do not work like it should. So probably the most frequent, data is not as expected. So that is the kind of situation that I described earlier, where at the beginning, at the onset of the project, you're convinced that you have data to support machine learning this task, but instead you don't. If you look at it closer, you don't have that exact data. And so this is why when you start your project, you need samples. Projects at PySchool, when we discuss them initially with our clients, we can't promise them anything unless we've seen the data. That means we need to make sure that there is this input-output connection, and that we have plenty of samples of that type, and that also it's machine readable. So it's not just, I don't know, usually Excel files or collections of PDFs, forms, stuff like that, Word documents. That is not the kind of data that we need, because it's usually not machine readable. It's full of exceptions. Excel spreadsheets, they look uniform, but when you look at it closely, certainly if you've got more than 100 rows, then you find plenty of exceptions, plenty of things that cannot be parsed by an algorithm. And that is what I mean. Okay, next failure mode is this deployment issue. It's when you have this breaking path between the lab, so between the proof of concept, and the factory, so that is the production deployment. And there's a ton of things that can go wrong there. One of which is what happens when you move from static data to live data. There's even names for that. So it has to do with domain mismatch. Transfer learning is a solution in machine learning for these issues, but also it has to do with a thing that's called covariate shift in statistics, which is that essentially, if you will, the characteristics of what's going on in production, the statistics are not the same statistics that you have seen in your lab, in your prototype world. Okay, when that happens, and it's pretty frequent. Among others, it can be due to changes in causal structure. So when you work in production, you cause things in a different order than what you have collected in your static data, in your training data, and that means that things will break down on the deployment side. And then you've got the usual sort of staffing issue, where maybe you're tackling a project or you have the hopes of solving an AI task, but it's actually much too difficult. So you're tackling something which the book says should be solvable, but actually to solve it, you would need something that will only be available 5 years from now in state of the art. And that's not a good idea, to try today. You don't want to be doing research when you do AI pilot projects. There are people, scientists out there who do the research. There are people like us at PySchool who do applied research and who monitor what's going on in scientific conferences. So for instance, this week, we have one of the major scientific conferences going on in machine learning called NeurIPS, virtual, obviously. And so I'm attending NeurIPS to sieve, to select, filter through all the scientific production that we've had in the past 4 or 6 months for you to understand what's going to be important to use if you want to be top of the pop, and that's what we want to be for the months to come. Fourth failure mode, you need a system, not you need to solve for a system you didn't need to solve for just a single task. This echoes the advice that I was giving for the selection of your pilot project, to select a project where you leave aside complexity. You try and pick something that is simplifiable enough that you can have business impact without inventing a big thing that needs IT integration, databases at all sides, and has many different moving parts. This is usually not a good AI pilot project. And for that reason, it will often enough fail because it's too complicated to make work. Okay. And I will finish with that. I'll finish with that and say thank you for your attention. Again, you have our contact details here in the form that I've sent out in the chat. So if you want to get in touch, you can send us your details here, or you can send us an email, go onto our website. It's pycampus-school.com, so it's pretty easy to get there. And if you have well, concrete questions / a concrete project, or want to start something concretely, independently of the level of maturity of your organization, then let us know and we can have a chat about that. Thank you. Bye-bye.